Oak Ridge Lane looked like the kind of place where nothing bad ever happened. It curved gently through a small suburban neighborhood, lined with maple trees that dropped red and gold leaves every autumn. The houses were close enough for neighbors to recognize each other, but far enough apart to feel private. White fences stood straight and clean. Mailboxes were decorated during holidays. At night, porch lights glowed softly, giving the street a warm and safe feeling. People who lived there believed they were lucky. Most mornings followed the same routine. Cars backed out of driveways at nearly the same time. Parents walked their children to the bus stop, coffee cups steaming in their hands. Retired couples took slow walks with their dogs, stopping to talk about the weather or local news. Oak Ridge Lane was predictable, and the residents liked it that way. Sarah Collins fit perfectly into that picture. She was 32 years old, with tired eyes and a gentle smile that never seemed to disappear, no matter how long her shift had been. Sarah worked as a nurse at a nearby hospital, often covering night duty when others refused. She did it for the overtime, for her son, and because she believed helping people mattered. Even after 12-hour shifts, she still found the energy to wave at her neighbors or ask how they were doing. Sarah lived in a small blue house near the middle of the street. Inside, the house always smelled faintly of laundry soap and coffee. Toys were scattered in neat piles, evidence of an 8-year-old boy who loved building things and asking too many questions. Her life wasn't easy, but it was stable. And for Sarah, stability meant everything. Her son, Ethan, was the center of her world. Every decision she made was for him. She worked late so he could have better opportunities. She moved to Oak Ridge Lane because it was quiet and safe, the kind of place where a child could grow up without fear. She trusted the street. She trusted the people on it, especially her neighbor next door. Daniel Harper moved into the gray house beside Sarah 2 years earlier. He was polite, quiet, and always seemed calm. He didn't have children, didn't host parties, and didn't attract attention. He worked from home, something vague involving computers that no one fully understood. Sometimes neighbors joked that Daniel was mysterious, but they meant it lightly. There was nothing threatening about him. Daniel kept his lawn trimmed perfectly. His trash cans were always brought in on time. He waved when spoken to and nodded politely when passing someone on the sidewalk. When Sarah's internet went down once, Daniel offered his Wi-Fi without hesitation. When her car wouldn't start during winter, he helped push it into the driveway and waited until the tow truck arrived. To Sarah, Daniel was simply helpful. They spoke often, usually in short conversations over the fence or while taking out trash. Daniel knew her work schedule. Sarah knew he stayed up late. It all felt normal, natural, harmless. On the surface, Oak Ridge Lane was exactly what it appeared to be. But appearances have a way of hiding things. The night before everything changed was quiet, even by Oak Ridge standards. A light rain fell, tapping gently against windows and rooftops. Sarah arrived home just after midnight, exhausted from a long shift. She parked her car, gathered her bag, and walked up the driveway. Daniel's porch light was on, as it often was late at night. Daniel stood in his doorway. He smiled and waved. Sarah waved back. She didn't stop to talk. She was tired. Ethan was asleep. She wanted nothing more than a shower and bed. She unlocked her door, stepped inside, and locked it behind her. That was the last time anyone would see Sarah Collins alive. The next morning, Oak Ridge Lane woke up as usual. Cars pulled out of driveways. Dogs barked. The rain had stopped, leaving the street damp and shining under the early sun. But something was wrong. Sarah's car was still in the driveway. By 9 a.m., Sarah should have been asleep after her shift or already on her way back to the hospital. Her absence went unnoticed at first. Nurses often worked strange hours. People slept in. Life continued. At 10:30, the hospital called her phone. No answer. At 11, Ethan's school called when he didn't show up. Still no answer. By noon, concern turned into fear. The police arrived quietly, without sirens. Two officers walked up Sarah's driveway while neighbors peeked through curtains. The door was locked. No broken windows. No sign of forced entry. Inside, the house felt still. Too still. The officers moved room to room, calling out her name. The kitchen was clean. Dishes washed. A half-empty coffee mug sat on the counter. Ethan's backpack rested by the door, ready for school. Everything looked normal. Until they reached the bedroom. Sarah lay on her bed, covers pulled slightly aside. There was no sign of a struggle. No overturned furniture. No broken items. Just one wound, precise and deadly. She never had a chance to scream. The officers stepped back, stunned by how calm the scene looked. Whoever had done this knew exactly what they were doing. This was not anger. This was not panic. This was deliberate. News spread across Oak Ridge Lane within minutes. Police tape went up. Neighbors gathered in small groups, whispering and shaking their heads in disbelief. Some cried. Others stood silently, staring at Sarah's house as if it no longer belonged in their world. Daniel Harper stood among them. He looked pale. Shocked. His voice trembled when he spoke to officers. He said he hadn't heard anything. He said Sarah was a good neighbor. He asked if Ethan was safe. Everything about his reaction seemed right. Too right. Detectives quickly realized the most disturbing detail. There were no signs of forced entry. That meant Sarah had either let her killer inside or the killer already had access. The idea terrified everyone. Oak Ridge Lane had always believed danger came from outside. From strangers. From dark alleys and unfamiliar places. Not from inside their own homes. As police cars lined the street and the sun climbed higher, fear settled into the neighborhood like a heavy fog. Doors were locked. Curtains were drawn. People realized something they had never considered before. The killer didn't break in. The killer walked in. And that meant one thing. The killer was someone Sarah trusted. Someone who knew her routine. Someone who belonged on Oak Ridge Lane. As the body was taken away and the house was sealed, a chilling truth began to form, though no one dared say it out loud yet. The danger was not gone. It was still there. Living quietly. Watching. Right next door. The days after Sarah Collins was found dead passed in a blur of shock and disbelief. Oak Ridge Lane no longer felt like a neighborhood. It felt like a crime scene that refused to let go of its darkness. Police cars came and went at all hours, their presence a constant reminder that something terrible had happened in a place where nothing terrible was ever supposed to happen. Sarah's house stood silent behind yellow tape. The windows were closed, the lights off, and yet many neighbors swore they could still feel her presence. Some said they imagined seeing her silhouette in the bedroom window late at night. Others said they could smell coffee in the morning, drifting through the street like it used to. Grief mixed with fear, creating an uneasy atmosphere that clung to everyone. Detectives worked quickly, but the lack of evidence slowed everything. There were no signs of forced entry, no broken locks, no damaged doors or windows. That detail alone changed the direction of the investigation. It meant the killer had either been invited inside or had access to the house already. The idea spread through the neighborhood like poison, making people question every smile and every friendly wave they had ever exchanged. Inside Sarah's home, investigators found almost nothing out of place. Her purse was on the chair where she usually left it. Her wallet was inside, with cash untouched. Jewelry lay neatly in its box. There were no missing valuables, no signs of robbery, no obvious motive. The murder was clean, quiet, and efficient. Too efficient. The medical examiner confirmed what detectives already suspected. Sarah had been stabbed once, in a precise spot. The wound suggested control and confidence, not panic or rage. There were no defensive wounds. She likely never saw it coming. She may not have even realized what was happening until it was over. The murder weapon was gone. That detail frustrated investigators the most. Without it, they had no fingerprints, no DNA, no trail to follow. Whoever killed Sarah had taken the weapon with them, erasing one of the most important pieces of evidence. It was not the act of an impulsive killer. It was the act of someone who planned ahead. Police questioned everyone who knew Sarah. Her co-workers described her as quiet and kind. She avoided drama, kept to herself, and focused on her son. There was no history of violent relationships, no restraining orders, no arguments that could explain such a brutal act. Her phone records showed nothing unusual. No threatening messages, no secret conversations. Her life, on paper, was calm. Neighbors were interviewed next. Some were nervous, others defensive. People stumbled over words, afraid of saying the wrong thing. Many repeated the same sentence over and over. We didn't hear anything. The murder had happened without sound. No screams. No calls for help. That fact alone haunted the entire street. It meant the killer had been close, quiet, and confident enough to move without being noticed. Daniel Harper was questioned like everyone else. He told detectives he had been working late that night, finishing a project for a client. He said he went to bed around 3 in the morning and slept through the next day. He hadn't heard anything unusual. He hadn't seen anyone suspicious. His answers were calm, clear, and consistent. He even offered to help the police if they needed anything. To detectives, Daniel looked like an ordinary man. No criminal history. No complaints from neighbors. No reason to doubt his story. His computer activity matched his timeline. His phone location placed him at home all night. There was nothing concrete to hold against him. As the investigation stalled, fear took root. Parents stopped letting their children play outside. Doors were locked at all hours. Security cameras appeared overnight, pointed toward streets and driveways. Neighbors avoided eye contact, unsure who they could trust. Conversations grew short and tense. The sense of community that once defined Oak Ridge Lane began to crumble. The local news covered the story daily. Reporters described the killer as someone who knew the victim, someone who blended in, someone still free. The phrase repeated again and again, making people uneasy. A killer could be anyone. A man walking his dog. A friendly neighbor offering help. Someone you waved to every morning. Police tried to reassure the public, but privately, they were struggling. They had no suspects, no witnesses, no solid leads. Each day that passed without answers made the case colder and more frustrating. Sarah's funeral brought the neighborhood together for the first time since her death. The church was full. Friends, family, co-workers, and neighbors sat in silence, listening to stories about her kindness and strength. Ethan sat in the front row, clutching a small toy in his hands, too young to fully understand what had been taken from him. Daniel attended the funeral. He sat quietly near the back. When it was over, he helped carry chairs and spoke softly to Sarah's relatives. He offered to watch Ethan if needed. His kindness did not go unnoticed. Some neighbors found comfort in him. Others felt something they couldn't explain. A quiet unease. As weeks passed, the police reduced their presence. The yellow tape came down. Sarah's house was cleaned and locked. The case was officially labeled as open but inactive, a phrase that sounded too final for something so unresolved. Life on Oak Ridge Lane slowly returned to a version of normal. People went back to work. Children returned to school. Smiles reappeared, though they never quite reached the eyes. Fear remained, hidden beneath routine. At night, porch lights stayed on longer. Windows stayed shut. Every unexpected noise felt louder. Every shadow felt closer. Some neighbors started to watch each other. They noticed who stayed up late, who walked outside at odd hours, who closed their curtains too early. Paranoia replaced trust, turning friendly curiosity into suspicion. Daniel Harper continued his life unchanged. He mowed his lawn. He worked from home. He waved politely. He checked on Ethan from time to time, offering help when Sarah's relatives needed support. He spoke often about how terrible the crime was and how the killer deserved justice. No one suspected him. That was the most dangerous part, because while Oak Ridge Lane tried to forget, the truth was already buried in plain sight. The killer had not disappeared. He had not fled the city. He had not made a mistake. He had simply gone back to living his life. Waiting. Watching. Blending in. And as the case grew colder, one silent fact remained. Someone on Oak Ridge Lane knew exactly who killed Sarah Collins. And they were still walking free. Time has a way of softening fear, even when it should not. As months passed without new information, the tension that once gripped Oak Ridge Lane slowly loosened. People grew tired of being afraid. Curtains were opened again. Children returned to playing outside, though always within sight of a parent. Conversations about Sarah Collins became quieter, spoken in careful tones, as if saying her name too loudly might bring the horror back. The police had not forgotten her, but without evidence, there was nothing they could do. Her case sat in a filing cabinet, marked unresolved, waiting for a mistake that never seemed to come. Then, 9 months later, the silence broke. It was a warm spring evening when Mark Reynolds was found dead in his living room. Mark lived directly across the street from Sarah's old house. He was 41, recently divorced, and shared custody of his 2 children. Friends described him as loud, friendly, and sometimes impatient, but never violent. He had lived on Oak Ridge Lane for over a decade and was known by nearly everyone. His body was discovered by his sister, who had come to pick up the children for the weekend. When she opened the door, she knew immediately that something was wrong. The house was too quiet. The lights were on, but the television was off. Mark lay on the floor, his eyes open, his body still. Police arrived within minutes. The similarities to Sarah's murder were impossible to ignore. Mark had been stabbed once. Clean. Controlled. There were no signs of a struggle. No forced entry. Nothing stolen. The killer had entered and left as if they belonged there. This time, the fear did not creep in slowly. It exploded. Neighbors gathered outside, whispering in panic. Some cried openly. Others demanded answers from the police. The word serial killer spread through the crowd before detectives even said it out loud. 2 victims. Same street. Same method. There was no denying it anymore. Oak Ridge Lane was hunting ground. Police sealed off the area again, their presence heavier than before. Forensic teams worked through the night, searching every corner of Mark's house for something they had missed the first time. Anything. A fingerprint. A footprint. A trace of DNA. Once again, they found almost nothing. The killer had been careful. Almost surgical. Detectives reopened Sarah's case immediately, laying both files side by side. The patterns were clear. Both victims lived alone. Both were attacked late at night or early in the morning. Both had routine schedules that would have been easy to observe. Most disturbing of all, both had been killed by someone they likely trusted. This time, police pushed harder. Neighbors were questioned again, more aggressively. Officers asked about arguments, grudges, strange behavior. People who had been calm before now spoke with shaking voices. Fear made memories sharper, and suddenly, small details began to surface. One neighbor mentioned seeing a shadow moving between houses late at night, sometime around Mark's death. Another recalled hearing a door close softly but thinking nothing of it at the time. Someone else pointed out how one house always seemed to have lights on at odd hours. Daniel Harper's house. Detectives paid closer attention to him now. They reviewed his previous statement, his timeline, his habits. Nothing jumped out as a lie. He still appeared cooperative, calm, and polite. But now, that calmness felt different. Too controlled. They looked deeper into the victims' lives, searching for a connection beyond proximity. At first, there seemed to be none. Sarah and Mark were friendly but not close. They didn't work together. They didn't socialize much. They had no known shared conflicts. Then a junior detective noticed something small but strange. Both Sarah and Mark had used the same internet network during outages. Daniel's Wi-Fi. He had offered it generously when their service went down. It was a harmless detail, something neighbors did all the time. But it meant Daniel had access to their devices, their schedules, their routines. It was not evidence, but it was a thread. Police obtained permission to review Daniel's internet logs. Nothing illegal appeared. No searches about murder. No suspicious activity. He was careful even there. Still, the pressure mounted. Mark's children were sent to live with relatives. Families along Oak Ridge Lane began making plans to leave. Houses went up for sale. Trust shattered completely. Neighbors no longer gathered. They avoided each other, afraid that friendliness might be mistaken for something else. The media descended on the street again, this time more aggressively. Headlines called Oak Ridge Lane a street of fay. Reporters stood outside houses, asking questions no one wanted to answer. The community that once prided itself on safety was now known for death. Daniel Harper continued to live his life as if nothing had changed. He spoke to police when asked. He expressed horror at the second killing. He said he hoped the police would catch the monster responsible. He even attended a neighborhood meeting where residents discussed installing more cameras and hiring private security. He sat quietly, listening, watching. Inside the police department, frustration grew. 2 murders. No suspect. No weapon. No witnesses. Pressure came from above. The public demanded answers. Detectives felt the weight of every passing day. Then something unexpected happened. A woman from 3 houses down called the police late one night. She said she remembered something that had bothered her since Mark's death. She recalled seeing Daniel standing outside Mark's house weeks before the murder, late at night, staring at the door. At the time, she assumed they were friends or that Daniel was waiting for him. But now, she wasn't so sure. Police returned to Daniel's house the next day, this time with sharper eyes. They noticed small details they hadn't before. The way Daniel watched them as they walked around his yard. The way his answers matched too perfectly with previous statements. They requested a search warrant. At first, the judge refused. Suspicion was not enough. There was still no physical evidence linking Daniel to either crime. But Oak Ridge Lane could feel something shifting. The killer had grown bold. 2 lives had been taken, and whoever was responsible believed they were untouchable. As night fell on the street once again, porch lights flickered on, illuminating empty sidewalks and locked doors. Fear hung in the air heavier than ever before. This was no longer about solving a past crime. This was about stopping the next one. Because now everyone understood the truth. The killer wasn't gone. He was still here, living among them, and watching closely for his next opportunity. The request for a search warrant sat on a judge's desk for 2 days, while fear continued to grow on Oak Ridge Lane. Those 48 hours felt endless to the detectives who knew, deep down, that time mattered. A killer who had already struck twice was not likely to stop. The longer they waited, the more confident he would become. When the warrant was finally approved, it came quietly, without announcement. Police did not want panic, and they did not want the suspect elated. They arrived at Daniel Harper's house just after sunrise, when the street was still half asleep and the morning air was cool. Daniel opened the door in his pajamas. He looked surprised but not alarmed. His expression was calm, polite, almost bored, as if he had been expecting this moment. He stepped aside immediately, allowing the officers to enter. He did not ask for a lawyer. He did not protest. He simply watched. The house smelled clean, like disinfectant and fresh air. Everything was in its place. Shoes lined neatly by the door. Furniture arranged with careful balance. There were no personal photos on the walls, no family portraits, no signs of chaos or emotion. It felt more like a showroom than a home. Officers searched slowly, methodically. The living room revealed nothing unusual. The kitchen was spotless. The bedroom was simple, almost empty, with the bed made perfectly tight. Every drawer contained exactly what it should. Clothes were folded with precision. Nothing appeared out of place. Daniel sat at the dining table, hands folded, watching them move through his life. He answered questions calmly, without hesitation. His voice never rose. His face never changed. It was almost disappointing. Then one officer noticed something strange in the basement. At the bottom of the stairs, behind a shelf stacked with boxes, there was a faint seam in the wall. It was subtle, easy to miss. The officer pushed gently, and the wall shifted inward. Behind it was a hidden room. The air inside was cold and still. A single light flickered on, revealing a space that did not belong in any normal home. The walls were bare, the floor concrete. Against one side stood a metal table. Shelves lined the other wall, holding objects wrapped carefully in plastic. Not trash, not tools, weapons, knives of different sizes, cleaned and preserved, each placed with intention. Some appeared unused. Others showed faint discoloration that suggested age and use. A chill ran through the officers as they realized what they were looking at. Then they found the notebooks. Dozens of them. Each one filled with tight, careful handwriting. Names were written at the top of pages. Addresses. Daily routines. Work schedules. Notes about habits. Notes about moods. Every house on Oak Ridge Lane was documented. Sarah Collins's name appeared early in the books. Her schedule was detailed down to the minute. Night shifts. School mornings. Even notes about when she usually showered. Mark Reynolds' name appeared later. His work hours. His children's visits. His temper. Small complaints he had voiced to neighbors. Both names were circled. In different colors. Other names were listed too. Not circled yet. One notebook contained maps of the street, hand-drawn with careful precision. Lines showed paths between houses. Notes marked blind spots where streetlights did not reach. Another notebook focused entirely on timing, listing windows of opportunity late at night and early in the morning. This was not impulsive. This was obsession. Upstairs, Daniel continued to sit calmly, unaware or pretending to be unaware of what had been discovered. When detectives finally brought him to the basement and showed him the room, his expression changed only slightly. He smiled. Not with joy. With relief. At the station, the interrogation began. Daniel waved his right to an attorney. He leaned back in his chair and spoke as if he were explaining a simple idea to people who had taken too long to understand. He admitted everything. He spoke about Sarah first. He said she had broken the rules. When asked what rules he meant, Daniel explained that neighborhoods were built on respect and order. He believed people revealed their true nature in small moments. A comment. A look. A complaint. He claimed Sarah had once spoken badly about him to another neighbor. He had overheard it through an open window. To Daniel, that moment marked her as dishonest. Untrustworthy. He said he watched her after that. Mark, he said, was worse. Loud. Angry. Disruptive. Daniel remembered Mark complaining about his late-night work noises, calling him strange. That complaint, Daniel believed, threatened the balance of the street. In Daniel's mind, he was not killing. He was correcting. He described the murders without emotion. He explained how he chose the moment, how he entered quietly, how he made sure there would be no noise, no mess, no chance of survival. He spoke about it like a craft he had perfected. Detectives struggled to hide their reactions. Years of training had not prepared them for someone so detached, so certain of his own logic. Then Daniel said something that made the room go silent. He told them there was supposed to be a third victim. According to Daniel, the third name had been chosen weeks before Mark's death. A teenage boy who lived 2 houses down. Daniel believed the boy was disrespectful, careless, and reckless. He said the boy represented the future of what the neighborhood would become if no one intervened. He had planned it carefully. But on the night he went to act, the boy was not home. Daniel waited. Hours passed. For the first time, his plan failed. That failure frustrated him. He said it made him restless, angry in a way he had not felt before. The sense of control he relied on slipped away. That was when he turned his attention to Mark instead. Detectives realized the truth. The only reason there were not 3 bodies was luck. The teenager had survived without ever knowing how close he came to death. Police immediately notified the family. The boy was placed under protection. His parents listened in horror as detectives explained how their son's name appeared in Daniel's notebooks, marked and measured like the others. As Daniel's confession became public, Oak Ridge Lane erupted with shock and guilt. Neighbors replayed every interaction they had ever had with him. Every smile. Every helpful gesture. Every time they had trusted him without question. The mask Daniel wore had been perfect. Too perfect. He had blended into the background so completely that no one questioned him. His calm nature, his quiet lifestyle, his willingness to help had all worked in his favor. He had studied people who never thought they were being watched. The realization was devastating. Daniel Harper was charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder, with evidence supporting a third planned attempt. He showed no remorse during his court appearances. He sat silently, watching the room, just as he always had. Oak Ridge Lane was left forever changed. People learned that monsters do not always announce themselves. They do not always look dangerous. Sometimes they wear normal faces and live ordinary lives. Sometimes they hide behind kindness. Sometimes they live next door. And sometimes, the most terrifying evil is the one that knows you better than you know yourself. The arrest of Daniel Harper should have brought relief, but Oak Ridge Lane did not feel safe again. Even with the killer behind bars, the damage he left behind could not be undone. The street that once felt warm and familiar now felt hollow, as if something vital had been drained from it. People looked at their own homes differently. Windows seemed thinner. Doors felt weaker. Silence no longer felt peaceful. For detectives, the case was not finished yet. A confession was powerful, but they needed to understand everything. They needed to know how close the neighborhood had come to even greater tragedy. Daniel spoke freely in the days that followed. He seemed eager, almost proud, to explain his thinking. He described his planning in careful detail, how he studied people until he believed he understood who they really were beneath their polite smiles. He believed most people were pretending, hiding selfishness and cruelty behind friendly behavior. In his mind, he was the only honest one. But when investigators asked him about the third victim, something changed. His voice slowed. His words became more deliberate. He described the teenager calmly, almost casually. A boy who laughed loudly with friends. A boy who played music too late. A boy who talked back to adults and didn't care who heard him. Daniel believed that boy represented everything wrong with the future of Oak Ridge Lane. He said he watched him for weeks. He learned his routine. School hours. Weekend habits. The nights his parents worked late. The nights he was usually alone. Daniel noted the times when the boy stayed up gaming, the glow of his screen visible through the window. The plan was simple. Daniel would enter late at night, just as he had before. Quietly, carefully, cleanly. But that night, the boy wasn't home. He was sleeping at a friend's house after an unplanned invitation. A small, ordinary decision that saved his life. Daniel waited longer than usual, watching the house from the shadows. The lights never turned on. The door never opened. For the first time, Daniel felt something unfamiliar. Uncertainty. He said it made him angry. Not loud anger, but sharp and focused. The kind that tightens the chest and clouds the mind. That was when he shifted his attention back across the street. To Mark Reynolds. A man he already believed deserved punishment. Investigators realized how close they had come to discovering a third body instead of a survivor. It was a thought that left even the most experienced officers shaken. When police informed the teenager's family, the parents broke down. The boy himself struggled to understand what had happened. One ordinary night, one sleepover, had changed the course of his life without him ever knowing it. For weeks, he barely slept. Every shadow felt threatening. Every sound made him jump. He survived, but the knowledge followed him like a ghost. As Daniel's trial approached, the media attention intensified. News vans lined the street. True crime podcasts dissected every detail. Strangers drove past Oak Ridge Lane just to see the place where it all happened. Residents closed their curtains, feeling exposed and violated all over again. In court, the evidence was overwhelming. The hidden room, the notebooks, the weapons, the detailed surveillance of his neighbors, Daniel's own confession. There was no dramatic defense, no claim of innocence. Daniel sat quietly, expressionless, as witnesses spoke about Sarah and Mark. Their families described the pain of loss, the empty spaces left behind. Ethan's relatives spoke on his behalf, explaining how a child had lost his mother without warning, without explanation. Daniel showed no reaction. When it was his turn to speak, he did not apologize. He said he believed he had done what was necessary. That was when the room truly understood who he was. The judge sentenced Daniel Harper to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The sentence was firm, final, and deserved. As he was led away, Daniel did not look back. He did not struggle. He did not shout. He simply walked, calm to the very end. For Oak Ridge Lane, the trial's conclusion did not bring closure. Some families moved away within months. Houses were sold at lower prices. New residents arrived, unaware at first of the street's history. Those who stayed carried the weight of memory with them. Sarah's house remained empty for a long time. No one wanted to live there. Eventually, it was sold and renovated, the walls repainted, the rooms rearranged. But some neighbors swore the house still felt different, as if it remembered what had happened inside. Ethan moved away with relatives. People wondered how he would grow up, carrying the shadow of his mother's death. Those who knew him hoped he would remember Sarah for her kindness, not for the way she died. Mark Reynolds' children struggled too. Their home was filled with silence where laughter once lived. The neighborhood had watched them grow, and now it watched them leave. Years passed. The story of Oak Ridge Lane became one people told in hushed voices. It became a warning, a reminder, a lesson that was difficult to accept. Evil does not always arrive loudly. It does not always look dangerous. Sometimes it blends in so well that it becomes part of the background. It helps you, smiles at you, learns your habits, earns your trust. Daniel Harper was not a stranger in a dark alley. He was the man next door, the one who waved, the one who offered help, the one no one suspected. And the most terrifying truth of all was this. If not for a single missed night, a single change in plans, there would have been another victim. Someone else would have vanished from Oak Ridge Lane. Someone else would have been mourned. The killer was stopped, but only just in time. That is why the story of Oak Ridge Lane still matters. Because it reminds us that safety is not guaranteed by familiarity. That trust should never be blind. And that sometimes, the greatest danger is not the one we fear most. It is the one we never see coming. The killer was not hiding in the shadows. He was living right next door,